Sandy Locklear was a young widow and a struggling single mother.
She went through a lot. It was definitely tough to make sure that her children had what they needed.
But then she met Amos Hatfield, a widower old enough to be her father.
He wanted to help her out.
Amos was very giving to Sandy and to her children.
And before long, the lonely widow and widower found love.
She cared a lot for my grandpa.
He was smiling again. I even told her, I said, thank you for making my daddy smile.
But their happiness wouldn't last. Just after their first anniversary, the marriage would end in a brutal attack.
Is your husband breathing at all?
Two men wearing masks had broken into the home.
This boy can break me.
Was the attack a home invasion?
They were saying, get on the ground, where are the drugs, where's the money?
Was Amos's son actually the target?
Tommy had some drug issues in the past.
Or was Sandy secretly the key to solving the murders?
Sandy wasn't telling me everything.
That was not supposed to go down like that.
Loris, South Carolina is a sleepy town of 2,000, 10 miles inland from Myrtle Beach.
It's a complete contrast to what you see in Myrtle Beach with all of the attractions and tourists coming in. 10 miles out there, you have complete countryside with, horses and cattle roaming around and people still tilling the earth.
But on August 19th, 2012, at around 4 o'clock in the morning, a few hours before even Loris's farmers rose for the day, Horry County 911 received a chilling call.
911. Yes. I need somebody here immediately. Okay, ma'am, what's going on there? There's a shooting. I think 2 people are dead.
The caller was 40-year-old Sandy Locklear.
Sandy had told the 911 operator that two men forced their way in.
They had on black masks and masks. Yes. They dragged me back to the bedroom and they beat me and my husband over the head.
Is your husband breathing at all?
He's bloody all over.
And in addition to her husband, 66-year-old Amos Hatfield, Sandy believed that the intruders had attacked Amos's 40-year-old son, Tommy, who also lived in the trailer.
I don't know where he is. He's not answering me.
And while the intruders had left her alive, Sandy said she hadn't escaped unscathed.
They got me in the bedroom.
Who has you in the bedroom?
This boy can break me.
It was a horrifying tale. But once the police uncovered the details behind Sandy and Amos's marriage, they would soon be wondering, had she simply been lucky to survive? Or was Sandy more than just a witness? Born in 1971, Sandy Locklear started life just over the state line.
Sandy was born in Laurinburg, North Carolina. Sandy then moved to South Carolina when her parents got divorced.
Her parents split up when she was only 9 years old. Her father went to prison soon after, and Sandy spent most of her childhood moving around with her single mom.
She had a rough childhood. Based on everything that I know about her, she went through a lot.
And unfortunately, the obstacles continued to mount once Sandy's mother moved the family to New Jersey.
They were not wealthy, not well-to-do. Life was hard for her. She dropped out of school when she was in 8th grade.
But Sandy was determined to make something of her life. She eventually got her GED and went on to become a certified nursing assistant.
She worked during that job for several years.
She got married and had a child, too. But when the marriage eventually ended in divorce in 2001, Sandy and her 11-year-old daughter left New Jersey.
She'd returned to where she grew up.
Settling in Tabor City, North Carolina, she married a second time. And just as her first daughter became an adult, Sandy gave birth to a second daughter. But her happy family life would be marred by tragedy.
The gentleman that Sandy was married to at that point in time, he died. It was a car accident.
And that left Sandy on her own again.
It was definitely tough for Sandy. She struggled trying to make ends meet, trying to make sure that her children had what they needed.
But after 6 years as a single mom, the 39-year-old met someone who understood her struggle with loneliness all too well. Unlike Sandy, Amos Hatfield wasn't a North Carolina native. He was a veteran from West Virginia.
He was in the Air Force for almost 28 years.
And the Air Force had allowed him to see the world.
He enjoyed going places, knowing different countries. His favorite, though, it was Germany, because that's where he met my mother, the love of his life.
The couple married in 1966 and had 2 children, daughter Sylvia in 1967 and her little brother Tommy in 1971.
I was born in Germany, and Tommy, he was born in Virginia.
But after living in Germany, England, and Spain, the Air Force family landed stateside when the kids were teenagers.
We moved down here to Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, and we've stayed here.
And after more than 2 decades in the military, Amos retired and devoted his time to enjoying the rural Carolinas.
Fishing and hunting, that was really his main hobbies. And he helped my dad and stuff, do stuff outside, whatever he needed help with, he'd help him.
He also loved doting on his grandchildren.
He was the best grandpa I could have ever asked for. Everything. Anything I would have ever wanted or needed, he would have gave me.
However, Amos's blissful retirement wouldn't last long.
My mother died in July of 2001. She had cancer.
A widower at only 55, Amos was devastated.
I remember he was very sad, very depressed after my grandma passed away. They were the perfect couple.
He was very lonely. He didn't have anybody. He lived with us for about 2 months.
Afterwards, he stayed close to his daughter and her children, too, eventually settling near their home in Loris, South Carolina, a few miles inland from Myrtle Beach.
He found a little trailer and he stayed there.
It was on a pretty big lot. It was a several-acre lot, so it was pretty isolated from the other homes in the community.
But being near his grandchildren helped alleviate the widower's loneliness.
He'd come over after school and just hang out with us.
And 9 years after his wife's death, Amos would have even more company when his 39-year-old son, Tommy, moved into the trailer.
Tommy and his wife, they started having problems, and they kind of went their separate ways.
Amos was happy to help his son through the rough patch.
Tommy was trying to move on with his life and just trying to better himself.
And while his son regrouped, Amos discovered a new diversion from his loneliness, driving across the state line to play video poker in North Carolina.
That was his hobby. He liked to gamble. He was a night owl. He liked to do stuff at nighttime.
And it was while playing video poker at a Tabor City convenience store that the lonely widower found someone with similar interests.
One night, he came home and he said he met somebody, and I said, well, what's her name? And he said, Sandy.
According to his daughter, Amos had originally taken pity on the struggling single mom.
He said she has a little girl that's 5 years old, and her little girl supposedly got sick a lot, and my father wanted to help her out.
Although there may have been more to it than that.
She was not an unattractive woman. She was a very exotic-looking woman. He obviously must have found her attractive.
The pair soon started dating, despite the 26-year difference in their ages.
I think he was wanting companionship, and I think for her, she wanted security.
But what would his family say? When he took Sandy to his grandson's wedding in December of 2010, they were impressed.
That was the first time I met her, and she seemed very nice. She seemed very outgoing. She seemed like she cared a lot for my grandpa.
And she obviously made Amos happy.
He wasn't as lonely, and he was smiling again. And I remember I even told her, I said, thank you for making my daddy smile.
In return, Amos was true to his word, doing everything he could to help Sandy and her children.
Amos was very giving to Sandy and to her children, to both her kids, and took special care of her younger child, and helped out with school clothes and with getting everything that she needed.
He bought Sandy a car, And then in June of 2011, he even topped that.
He bought her a house in Tabor City, a brick home, so that she could raise her little girl, and she had another daughter that was going off to college.
This house was, something wonderful and something that she had aspired to all her life. And finally, she had a man in Amos who was willing to provide that for her.
A month later, in July 2011, Amos and Sandy married.
I think he fell in love with the idea of being in love and being able to take care of somebody.
But their happiness would be brief. Barely a year after Sandy and Amos said, "I do," the authorities would be wondering, could Amos continue taking care of Sandy even after he was gone? Coming up, the investigators struggled to understand the savage assault on Sandy, Amos, and Tommy.
Why this house? Why these victims?
And most of all, why would the attackers leave one victim alive?
Sandy was the only witness.
In the pre-dawn hours of August 19, 2012, 40-year-old Sandy Locklear called 911 in Horry County, South Carolina, and reported that she and her husband had just been attacked by two men.
They came through the back door on us with guns.
Her husband and her stepson were both shot.
And according to Sandy, the intruders had harmed her, too.
They had me tied to the bed.
They had you tied to the bed?
Yeah, they raped me.
Sandy said she'd managed to free herself after the attackers left.
All right, baby. Well, how long ago did this happen?
About 40 minutes ago.
I have help on the way, baby, okay? Stay with me.
Thank you.
And moments later, while Sandy was still on the line with 911, the first deputies arrived on the scene.
I'm out here.
You get myself. Honey, is that the police?
Inside the house, the deputies found the bodies of 66-year-old Amos Hatfield and his 40-year-old son, Tommy.
There were pillows over their heads, and they were obviously deceased.
Sandy, they found huddled in the back bedroom, where the attackers had left her bound.
She'd been taped up. She still actually had some tape, some duct tape, that was stuck to her clothes or her wrist. She had freed herself from this duct tape in order to get the phone and call 911.
And the entire ordeal had clearly left her badly shaken.
Sandy was obviously distraught. I told her that we were here to help her, she was safe with us, and that we were going to take her to the hospital.
And not just for treatment.
If she was a victim of sexual assault, her body's a crime scene.
They had to do what's known as a rape kit.
There's going to be evidence on her that can degrade by the hour. So it's very important to get her to the hospital to start the medical process, medical exam, to recover any evidence that might be on her.
With Sandy on her way to the hospital, the investigators turned their attention to the crime scene.
It looked like an execution-style murder.
They had both been shot through the head, and the culprit had used a pillow to silence the gunshot.
However, the bodies laid out on the living room floor weren't all that the investigators noticed.
There was a coffee table that had been overturned. There was an ashtray that had been thrown all over the place.
The house appeared to have been ransacked a little bit, consistent with what would have been maybe a push-in robbery or a home invasion robbery.
But if it was a home invasion, there were still plenty of questions left unanswered.
It was a bit perplexing. Why this house? Why these victims?
Was it just a random crime?
When I went to talk to the neighbors, they'd known that there'd been a lot of break-ins in the area, a lot of home burglaries.
Or was it possible that Amos or his son had been specifically targeted? One of the first officers at the scene provided a possible answer.
I had been told by one of the other investigators or one of the patrol officers who knew him, Tommy Hatfield, had a life in the drug community.
According to what friends and family told the investigators, Tommy's history with drugs was intertwined with the collapse of his marriage.
Tommy got married when he was 24 years old in 1995, and they had 3 children, and one passed away from crib death.
The sudden loss of their baby boy in 2001 left Tommy and his wife devastated.
When they lost their baby, he turned to drugs. It was marijuana, and he would take pills.
The drugs had eventually led to the end of their marriage and pushed Tommy even deeper into addiction.
He was separated from his wife, and he was really devastated. He was self-medicating with pills, and he drank a lot, just trying to numb the pain.
And not just the pain of his son's death and his failed marriage.
Our mother passed away, and that was another setback. My mom and my father, they stood by Tommy through thick and thin. They did everything they could for Tommy.
But in 2007, Tommy's oldest daughter died too.
She passed away 2 days after her 18th birthday in a car accident.
His daughter's death threw Tommy into another tailspin.
It just seemed to get harder and harder.
He wasn't a terrible person, but he had had a few run-ins with the law.
But recently, Tommy had taken steps to turn his life around.
Around 2011, Tommy moved in with my daddy.
Amos was there for him, living there with him so that he could help him.
My grandpa always looked out for my uncle.
And with his father's support, Tommy had tried to make a fresh start.
He, to me, seemed like he was getting better and he was in our life again more.
He stopped the drugs. He never got in trouble with law enforcement, and I believe that changed his whole outcome.
Tommy had stopped having trouble with the law, but looking at the way he and his father had been murdered, the investigators couldn't help but wonder, had he angered someone from his drug days?
A crime scene like that would not have been inconsistent with a drug-related crime. This was apparently a fairly well-staged, well-planned out crime to overpower 2 fairly large fellas and then execute them the way they did.
But had the killers made a crucial mistake by leaving Sandy alive?
Sandy was the only witness, and it was very important to sit down with Sandy and learn everything she knew about this particular incident.
She was going to help us solve this crime.
At least, that's what the investigators hoped when they brought her into the police station after the rape counselors released her from the hospital.
She had some scrubs on because they kept her clothes, as is customary in a rape case.
And she clearly remained shaken by the whole ordeal.
She was upset. She was crying in shock from seeing what she apparently saw.
During the interview, Sandy said that she and Amos had planned to spend the evening watching TV.
She was going to watch golf with him. Amos and she had talked on the phone earlier in that day and made plans.
And after watching TV, according to Sandy, they'd stayed up talking.
They talked, and they may have smoked some cigarettes, and at some point they got up to get ice cream. And when they were going to get ice cream in the kitchen, the door, boom, got kicked open.
2 men wearing masks had broken into the home, screaming, hollering.
They were saying, get on the ground, where are the drugs, where's the money?
And based on what Sandy said, the investigators had been right to wonder if the attack had something to do with Tommy's troubled past.
Sandy said these 2 men screamed almost immediately, "We got you, Tommy boy, we got you, Tommy boy."
She says that Tommy seemed to recognize them. And no doubt in her mind, they were intent on attacking Tommy.
Exactly what transpired in the living room, Sandy couldn't say.
While one of them guarded Tommy and Amos, the other one forced her into a back bedroom and sexually assaulted her. And then she was in a back bedroom when she heard shots.
But based on what she told the investigators, one thing seemed clear.
Everything led me to believe that the push-in robbery was drug-related.
Coming up, the investigators uncover a new wrinkle.
There was a lot of tension there between Tommy and Sandy Locklear.
And that leads to more questions.
It started to become apparent to me that Sandy wasn't telling me everything.
By mid-morning of August 19, 2012, it had been only a few hours since 40-year-old Sandy Locklear called 911 to report that intruders had murdered her husband and stepson in their Loris, South Carolina home.
They were both shot in the back of the head. Just smells of execution from one end to the other.
The victims were 66-year-old Amos Hatfield and 40-year-old Tommy Hatfield.
Tommy had some drug issues in the past that he was trying to recover from, and Amos was trying to help him get back on the right track.
And based on what Sandy had just told the investigators, that may have cost Amos his life.
She told me that two individuals pushed through the door, started immediately yelling, "Tommy boy, we got you now. We want the drugs, we want our money," which led me to believe that this was a drug-related crime.
The attackers had left Sandy alive, but she hadn't escaped entirely.
She stated that one of them drugged Sandy to the back bedroom, threw her on the bed, ripped off her clothes, and raped her.
Sandy said the attackers had been wearing masks, but did she know anything that could possibly give the investigators a lead?
They started asking her, where could these boys have come from?
If she was in Tommy's life, there would not be a stretch that she might have seen these people that Tommy hung out with.
Sandy said she did remember something. Was it the breakthrough they needed?
Sandy started to say yes, that one of them did kind of look familiar.
In fact, according to Sandy, she'd seen him just an hour or two before the murder.
She begins telling a story about how she stopped at a convenience store in Loris, and she says two strangers came up and asked her out of the blue, "Do you know Amos Hatfield? Or do you know Tommy Hatfield?"
Sandy said she thought nothing of it at the time, but she had answered that she not only knew Tommy, she was married to his father, Amos.
She said, "Yes, he's my husband, and I'm going over to his house." And she said, "They must have followed me."
It was an amazing coincidence, to say the least.
They just happened to hit the lotto, these guys. They just happened to run into the one person that was related to them. We found that a little bit odd.
It started to become apparent to me that Sandy wasn't telling me everything, that she had information that she needed to share, that at that particular time she was not willing to share. And then the interview started to take on more of a interrogation tone.
Was it possible Tommy and her husband hadn't been murdered over a drug debt?
Drug dealers would much rather have their money paid than have two bodies on their hands. So the story it wasn't adding up.
Over the next several hours, the investigators continued to interrogate Sandy.
Sandy had come up with an answer for every question I had given her.
But Sandy wasn't the only person the investigators were talking to. They also asked Amos and Tommy's family to come in for interviews.
Simultaneously to my interview with Sandy, there's other detectives who are doing a parallel investigation.
And what they heard from Amos's family about Sandy's marriage was more than a little eye-opening.
They had a unorthodox living arrangement.
Because despite being married, Sandy and Amos didn't live together.
She had never stayed at Amos's really overnight before. They'd been married for a little over a year. She never stayed there.
Instead, Sandy and her 5-year-old daughter lived across the state line in the house Amos bought her.
It was kind of a bizarre marital setup.
In fact, Amos's daughter told the investigators that he'd initially kept the marriage secret.
I did not know about it until 6 months later.
Of course, they had reason to keep it quiet.
Sandy was a much younger woman, and Amos was an older fella, and I guess he thought that the family might object.
The family had objected.
She was younger than me. I had a big problem with that.
Although Amos's daughter could at least understand why her father had done it.
I would not put it past my daddy to go off and get married so that he could have the little girl on his health insurance so that she could be taken care of.
Amos's son, Tommy, was far less understanding, though.
Tom did not like them getting married.
And he really didn't like the way Sandy treated Amos.
She would not allow Mr. Hatfield to be in her home or spend the night in her home. He bought that home for her. Why was he not allowed to go stay with her?
According to friends and family, Tommy was convinced that Sandy was taking advantage of his father.
There was a lot of tension there between Tommy and Sandy Locklear.
My uncle always told us that she didn't come around unless she wanted something. Most of the time it was money for beer, or cigarettes, or gas money.
That wasn't all he had suspected either.
Tom thought there was other men in her life.
And then there was Amos's mysterious illness. According to the family, Amos had suddenly become sick a few months before the murder.
He would be incoherent. He didn't know what day it was.
It worried me bad that seeing my grandpa laying in the bed and barely having his eyes open, not knowing who my mom was, that was definitely scary, and that was not like him.
The family said they had suspected Sandy.
We thought that she was poisoning him.
And they'd tried to tell Amos, too.
We sat down with him a few times and was talking to him about it and saying, she's not good for you. She's poisoning you or drugging you or doing something.
Although according to the family, Amos would hear none of it.
He just got defensive every time and said, you guys don't know her. She's a very nice lady. She's not like that. And he would just stick up for her.
Had Amos's trust in Sandy been a fatal mistake? The investigators were starting to wonder.
All these factors together just really caused a lot more suspicion to fall on Sandy Locklear.
And the investigators had even more reason to be suspicious when they contacted the hospital and spoke to the doctors and counselors who'd treated Sandy.
The rape kit came back negative. There was no rape that the rape kit could find. There was no penetration.
But did that mean Sandy was lying?
For a sexual assault to occur, there doesn't have to be penetration.
Still, the rape kit results didn't match Sandy's statement. And that wasn't the only piece of evidence that made them doubt Sandy.
Search warrants were being served on her phone records.
And when the investigators got their hands on those records later that same afternoon, they made a telling discovery.
Shortly before 3 a.m., the morning of August 19th, there's a text to Sandy Locklear's phone asking if the door was locked. There was another text message 3 to 5 minutes later, a response saying, it's unlocked now. At that moment, we knew she was involved. That was the big aha moment.
This was 4 or 5 hours into the interview, I think. This pivotal point in the investigation, there was a knock on the door, and the captain from the unit handed me phone records. I said to Sandy, do you recognize this phone number? She said, yes. I said, who is it? She said, it's my cousin. I said, your cousin? I said, you texting your cousin 4 o'clock in the morning? What were you texting about? Oh, we were just saying hi and general chit-chat.
The investigators knew they had caught her in a lie.
I said, you opened up the back door to let these people in.
And it was when faced with just how much the investigators already knew that Sandy's story took a sudden and dramatic turn.
She looked at me and said, nobody was supposed to get hurt.
Coming up, Sandy tells her side of the story. And the investigators uncover a motive.
It was about money and greed.
By the afternoon of August 19th, it had been more than 4 hours since the Horry County, South Carolina investigators had begun interviewing 40-year-old Sandy Locklear.
They began the interview and treated her as a victim, as a witness, and said, please just tell us what happened.
The investigators were trying to get to the bottom of a traumatic incident that had started 12 hours earlier, when 2 men had burst into the Loris, South Carolina home of Sandy's husband, 66-year-old Amos Hatfield.
She claimed that they duct taped her and raped her in the bedroom.
And according to Sandy, while she had been tied up in the bedroom, the 2 men had murdered Amos and his son 40-year-old Tommy Hatfield.
She heard shots coming from the living room where Amos and Tommy were executed.
But then, the investigators uncovered text messages between Sandy and the mysterious intruders, informing them that the back door was unlocked.
If evidence shows you texted the secure entrance, and there's only one reason for you to do that, because somebody opened the door and committed a murder.
When police presented the text messages to Sandy, her demeanor completely changed.
No more lies, okay? Okay? No more lies.
She crumbles. She says, yes, I did it. It was part of a plan, but it wasn't to kill anybody.
She was telling police no one was supposed to get hurt.
Not that the police believed her.
I said, okay, Sandy, obviously you've been lying to me. You are under arrest.
And then, to emphasize the point, the investigators put her in handcuffs. But that didn't mean they were through with her.
I sat her back down and I said, now you have to tell me what's going on.
Sandy began by saying that the break-in that led to the murder had been Amos's idea, part of a plan to get his son off drugs once and for all.
Mr. Bush, come in there and get it out of town and leave. That was it. That was it. I swear to God.
What Sandy was suggesting was that they had discussed, her and Amos had discussed, trying to scare him straight.
And according to Sandy, it was Amos who'd hired the two men, although she only knew one of their names.
She believed this individual's name was James.
Well, the James I'm talking about is the one who cut my grass.
But Sandy claimed she didn't know the other man, the man she said had actually pulled the trigger.
It got completely out of hand. That was not supposed to go down like that.
Was it possibly true? Could Amos have been behind the attack? The investigators had their doubts.
Amos had been through the ringer with Tommy before. He'd seen him in the depths of addiction, but there wasn't any evidence of addiction at this point.
Still, the investigators followed up on Sandy's claims. And when they tracked down the man who cut Sandy's lawn, 28-year-old James Evans, they made a surprising discovery.
James had a little bit of a criminal record.
Could Sandy have been telling the truth when she identified James as one of the killers?
A member of our patrol division knew of family members of James Evans and convinced him to turn himself in.
And when the investigators sat him down for questioning, he quickly caved.
I said that, James, you just don't, seem like a hard guy. How'd you get involved in this? And he said it was about the money. He says, Sandy came to me and said, do you want to make some money? I said, what kind of money are you talking about? And she said, big money. I said, well, what's big money? I said, big money would have been $50,000.
And that 50 grand was only his cut.
She told James that she was going to receive an inheritance or an insurance policy of $1 million.
But while James admitted being part of it, he denied being the killer.
James said, I didn't see who did the shooting.
However, he did give the investigators the name of the other intruder, 22-year-old Odom Bryant.
Odom Bryant. He was the nephew of James's girlfriend.
He's a career criminal.
And considering the details of his record, the investigators figured they'd found their killer.
Odom Bryant was under suspicion for another shooting over in Tabor City.
Although by the time the Horry County investigators started looking for him, he was long gone.
There was no tracing him.
The U.S. Marshal Service came in to help out.
It took 4 weeks, but the marshals were finally able to track him down.
He was arrested in Winston-Salem.
And when he was brought back to South Carolina on September 19th, the hardened criminal tried to play things cool.
And you enjoy your presence.
Okay, then we're done.
I smiled at him, I shook his hand, and I stood up. And that's when he said, James talked, didn't he?
And once he realized that the investigators had him, he tried to save himself.
We didn't know it was her husband. Only thing she told us was she wanted us to go in there and scare the dude up. That's what she told us, to be exact. She told us she wanted us to go in there and scare the dude up.
And just like Sandy, he claimed that things hadn't gone according to plan. Although according to Bryant, he wasn't the one who'd gotten out of control.
The trigger man, Sandy, she killed both of them people.
Did you see Sandy with the gun in her hand?
That's right. And I can actually say I knew for a fact Sandy Locklear was the trigger man.
And with that, the case basically boiled down to he said, she said.
Odom Bryant said Sandy Locklear did the shooting. Sandy Locklear said Odom Bryant did the shooting.
But would that be enough for Sandy to dodge a murder conviction? On June 2nd, 2014, Sandy Locklear was the first of the three co-conspirators to go on trial.
Sandy was nervous. She was shaking at the beginning of trial. Her hands were shaking.
And she had a lot to be nervous about.
Her own words, her own statements about how she was involved. We knew that was going to be one of the heaviest hitting pieces of evidence.
However, that wasn't all the prosecutors had. Once Sandy was in custody and they had James's story about a possible insurance motive, the investigators had executed a search warrant on the house Amos bought for Sandy in Tabor City.
They found like a little briefcase. It had some documentation in it. There was a life insurance policy.
This life insurance policy, on its face, reads $1 million.
And according to the prosecution's opening statement, that $1 million policy was the motive behind the murders.
It's all about money. All of it was about money and greed.
In fact, the prosecutors claimed that was the basis of Sandy and Amos's entire relationship.
He spent a lot of, if not all of his money trying to keep Sandy happy.
She was bleeding him dry with all her little bills, cigarettes, beer, making that house payment, giving her money for this or that.
Tommy's ex-girlfriend testified that Sandy had spent so much of Amos's money that it began to cause trouble between them.
They just started arguing a lot on the phone, arguing about money. He would say he didn't have it.
So according to the prosecutors, Sandy had decided to cash in.
She's sitting there with $1 million policy, her golden ticket.
And to back up their claim, the prosecutors put a cousin of Sandy's on the stand.
That cousin was well aware of the life insurance policy. And Sandy Locklear, she had sort of bragged that all it would take for her to be a millionaire was for Amos Hatfield to die.
Sandy's exact quote was, "When Amos dies, I'm going to be a rich bitch."
At least, that's what Sandy thought.
With any life insurance policy, the devil's in the details.
At a cursory glance, if you just read the first couple pages, it did appear to be $1 million policy. It was only worth $1 million if Amos were to die in a commercial airline crash. I think $300,000 if he died in an automobile wreck, and $200,000 death by any other means.
Though in the rural Carolinas, even $200,000 went a long way.
Hell of a motive for a murder.
But would the jury agree? When it was the defense's turn, they stood by what Sandy and Odom Bryant had both told the police, that the attack was supposed to scare Amos's son, Tommy, who they claimed was still abusing drugs.
It makes me sick to know that she blamed this on my uncle because he tried so hard to straighten his life up.
And the insurance, according to the defense, Sandy had nothing to do with it.
Amos was the one who went out and got the policy, not Sandy Locklear.
And in closing, the defense contended that Bryant was the killer, not Sandy.
No gunshot residue was found on Sandy Locklear. None of the police officers or detectives wanted to look at whether or not Sandy even had a gun.
Perhaps because, as the prosecutors argued in their close, it ultimately didn't matter who had the gun.
It doesn't matter who pulled the trigger. In South Carolina, it's an old adage that says the hand of one is the hand of all.
Coming up, the case goes to the jury. But what will the verdict be?
You just never know what a jury's going to do.
On June 12, 2014, the jury in Sandy Locklear's murder trial announced that it had reached a verdict.
The jury came back in about 3.5 to 4 hours.
The 42-year-old mother of two was accused of masterminding the murder of her husband, Amos Hatfield, and his son, Tommy, in order to collect almost $250,000 worth of life insurance.
It was greed, money, opportunism. He was just a means to an end for her.
This was one of the most wicked crimes that I've seen.
2 other men had been charged in connection with the killing, 24-year-old Odom Bryant and 30-year-old James Evans.
Sandy Locklear, whether she pulled the trigger or not, she unleashed those 2 to come inside and commit a murder.
A hand of one, hand of all. If you're all actually actively engaged, when that trigger's pulled, it's as if every hand is on that gun and every finger's on that trigger.
But did the relatively short deliberation mean that the jury agreed? Sandy's attorney wasn't so sure.
I've been in cases where the jury's deliberated for 15 minutes and come back with not guilty verdicts. I've been in cases where they've been out for a while and come back with guilty. You just never know what a jury's going to do.
So until the verdict was read, no one knew just what to expect.
The jury came back with a verdict of guilty.
Sandy was shocked by the outcome.
When they found her guilty, she was upset. Once again, she knew the gig was up.
She was bawling her eyes out when they said guilty.
But that wasn't the worst news.
She received 2 consecutive life sentences.
And there was no possibility of parole.
It's not any of this stuff. Well, life means 20 years or life means 30 years. We fully expect her to die in prison.
And while they may never know whether or not she actually pulled the trigger, Amos and Tommy's family agree that in the end, it doesn't really matter.
Even if she didn't pull the trigger, she may as well have. She may as well have. Because it was all her.
To me, it'll always be her. She's the reason that they're gone.
And as for why Sandy did it, Amos's daughter can only offer up one explanation.
I just think she's very evil. She knew that my father was very lonely, and she knew he had a good heart. For her to have done something like that to a poor, sweet little man that gave her everything, I just think it's very, very evil. I'm just so glad and thankful that God and everybody, she is where she belongs.
May 1981 cold case cracked. Buried evidence shocks investigators. The rain arrived before sunset, rolling over the pine forests of northern Maine like a wall of black smoke. By midnight, Route 11 had become an empty ribbon of cracked pavement swallowed by darkness, interrupted only by the occasional flash of lightning that revealed abandoned barns, forgotten mailboxes, and miles of silent wilderness. Locals would later swear they heard a woman scream, somewhere beyond the trees. Others insisted it was only the wind pushing through the spruce branches. No one agreed on what they heard that night. Everyone agreed on one thing. After October 17, 1981, the town of Ashbrook would never be the same again. At 6:42 the following morning, a logging truck stopped beside an old gravel turnout nearly 8 miles outside town. The driver climbed down expecting to clear a fallen branch blocking the road. Instead, he found a blue 1978 Chevrolet Nova sitting crooked against a ditch, the driver's door hanging open, the headlights still glowing weakly through the rain. The engine had long gone cold. The keys were still in the ignition. The purse remained on the passenger seat. The coffee inside a paper cup was half full. The windshield wipers had stopped exactly where the battery had died. But the driver was gone. 26-year-old Emily Carter had disappeared without leaving behind a single footprint. State police arrived within the hour. The first deputies believed they were looking at a simple roadside emergency. Perhaps she had wandered into the woods after a mechanical failure. Perhaps she had accepted a ride from a passing motorist. Search dogs were brought in before noon. The dogs tracked her scent only 27 yards from the vehicle. Then they stopped. They circled, whined, refused to continue. It was as though Emily Carter had vanished into thin air. By evening, helicopters crossed the forest while hundreds of volunteers formed search lines stretching across muddy fields and dense woodland. Firefighters checked abandoned cabins. Divers entered nearby ponds despite freezing temperatures. Every ditch, every hunting trail, every abandoned logging road was searched. Nothing. No yakit, no stew, no blood, No body. No answers. Ashbrook had never experienced anything like it. Emily was not the kind of woman people expected to disappear. She taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. She volunteered at the church food pantry every Saturday. She called her parents every Sunday evening without fail. Her life followed routine so predictable that neighbors joked they could set their clocks by her morning commute. She had no criminal record, no known enemies, no history of running away, no financial troubles, no secret relationships anyone could identify. She simply left work on Friday afternoon, stopped at Harper's Grocery to buy milk, bread, and canned soup, spoke briefly with the cashier about the coming storm, smiled, walked outside, drove away. She was never seen again. Within 48 hours, the disappearance became front-page news across Maine. Young teacher missing. State police expand search. No signs of foul play. Television crews flooded Ashbrook. Reporters stood beside Emily's abandoned car, describing the endless forest behind them. Experts speculated she may have become lost. Psychics claimed she was still alive. Hunters insisted someone had hidden her deep inside the wilderness. Rumors spread faster than facts. Every family in town locked their doors earlier. Parents refused to let children walk home alone. The forest no longer felt peaceful. It felt like it was hiding something. Detective Samuel Briggs arrived from Augusta 3 days after the disappearance. 48 years old, former Marine, quiet, methodical, known for solving difficult homicide cases without chasing headlines. His first impression disturbed him immediately. The scene looked too clean. Cars abandoned during emergencies rarely looked like Emily's. Victims usually took something with them. A handbag, car keys, a flashlight. Emily left everything behind. Even the groceries remained neatly stacked in the back seat. The detective crouched beside the driver's door. Rain had erased almost every trace around the vehicle. Almost. Near the rear tire, he noticed a partial impression in the mud. Not a footprint. A tire tread, different from Emily's car. Wider, newer, heavy duty. Someone else had stopped there. The impression was photographed, cast in plaster, bagged as evidence. It would eventually become exhibit number 12. At the time, nobody realized it would spend more than 40 years inside an evidence warehouse before becoming important. Briggs ordered a reconstruction of Emily's final movements. Every minute, every conversation, every receipt. At 3:55 p.m., she dismissed her class. At 4:18 p.m., she bought groceries. At 4:31 p.m., she purchased gasoline. The station attendant remembered she seemed distracted, not frightened. Distracted. He recalled Emily looking repeatedly into her rearview mirror. When asked why, she simply smiled and replied, "Someone keeps taking the same turns I am." The attendant laughed. "So you think someone's following you?" Emily shrugged. "Probably just coincidence." It was the last confirmed conversation anyone ever had with her. Police searched for the unidentified vehicle. Nothing. Roadblocks produced no witnesses. Drivers remembered the rain, the darkness, the difficult roads. No one remembered another car. Then came the anonymous phone call. It arrived 6 days after Emily disappeared. The voice belonged to a man. Low, calm, barely above a whisper. He said only one sentence. "You'll never find what's under the stones." The line disconnected. Police traced nothing. No fingerprints. No recording clear enough for voice comparison. Just one sentence. "You'll never find what's under the stones." Detectives searched abandoned quarries, stone walls, old foundations, collapsed wells. Nothing. The phrase became one of Maine's most infamous unsolved clues. Years passed. The investigation grew colder. Hundreds of interviews produced thousands of pages of reports. Former boyfriends, co-workers, neighbors, hunters, truck drivers, travelers. No arrests, no suspects, no evidence strong enough to charge anyone. In 1984, Detective Briggs officially retired. Before leaving, he carried one cardboard box out of the evidence room. Inside were photocopies of every report connected to Emily Carter. He told colleagues he was taking the case home because someone made a mistake. They assumed he meant the kidnapper. He didn't. He meant the investigation. For nearly 20 years, he reviewed the files every winter. He covered his dining room table with maps, pinned photographs to walls, highlighted witness statements, compared timelines. The more he read, the more one detail refused to leave his mind. The tire track. Not because of what it showed, because nobody ever compared to vehicles owned by local businesses. Police had checked private trucks, private cars, known offenders. They never checked municipal equipment, logging companies, construction contractors, road maintenance crews. Briggs requested old employment records. Most had already been destroyed. Companies had closed. Owners had died. Documents disappeared. Another dead end. By 2001, even Briggs began wondering whether the truth had vanished forever. Then fate intervened. A violent spring storm uprooted dozens of trees outside Ashbrook. One enormous pine crashed across property owned by the abandoned Black Creek lumber mill. When cleanup crews removed the roots, workers noticed something unusual. Several large stones had been deliberately arranged beneath the tree decades earlier, perfectly flat, perfectly level, as if covering something. Police were notified. Archaeologists arrived expecting old industrial waste. Instead, they uncovered a rusted steel toolbox buried nearly 4 feet underground. Inside were water-damaged notebooks, 2 disposable cameras, a broken wristwatch frozen at 5:13, and a sealed envelope addressed in neat handwriting. If anyone finds this, do not trust what you are told. The signature at the bottom read, Itchy, Emily Carter. The discovery electrified investigators. The envelope should not have existed. If Emily disappeared before reaching Black Creek Mill, how could her handwriting be buried beneath a tree that had not fallen until 20 years later? The notebooks contained only fragments. Rain damage had erased most pages, but one sentence remained perfectly readable. I finally know why they're using the quarry. Nobody understood what it meant. Not yet. The disposable cameras were rushed to forensic specialists. Most negatives had decomposed beyond recovery, except 3 frames. The first showed Emily smiling beside her classroom days before she vanished. The second captured an empty gravel road leading toward Black Creek. The third stopped every investigator cold. Taken at dusk through a rain-covered windshield, it showed the blurred outline of a dark pickup truck parked beside an abandoned stone quarry. Standing beside the truck was a man. His face was impossible to identify, but one detail survived. On the back of his rain jacket was a circular company logo, Black Creek Lumber Company. The business had shut down in 1986. Its owner had died 10 years later. Most employees had either moved away or disappeared into ordinary lives. Detectives reopened the case. For the first time in more than 2 decades, Emily Carter's file no longer carried the stamp that every investigator feared. Inactive, the evidence room in Augusta had not changed much since 1981. Steel shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Dust gathered along faded cardboard boxes, marked with handwritten case numbers. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a pale glow across decades of forgotten investigations. Somewhere in the back of the warehouse sat Emily Carter's original evidence box, untouched for years except by the occasional cold case review. Detectives joked that the room was a cemetery for unanswered questions. No one was laughing now. Within hours of discovery at Black Creek Lumber Mill, every item connected to Emily Carter was removed from storage and transported to the State Forensic Laboratory. The sealed envelope, the damaged notebooks, the disposable cameras, the rusted toolbox, the original tire cache recovered beside Emily's abandoned Chevrolet. Everything was photographed again using modern digital imaging. Everything was scanned, cataloged, preserved. Nothing would be overlooked a second time. Lead investigator Rebecca Sloan stood silently as technicians carefully unfolded the fragile letter recovered beneath the stones. Although much of the paper had been damaged by moisture, Several paragraphs remained surprisingly intact. Emily's handwriting was calm, steady, not the handwriting of someone panicking. She wrote, "If you're reading this, something happened before I had the chance to explain. They think nobody notices what comes in after dark. They're wrong. I wrote everything down because I don't know who I can trust anymore." The room became silent. Nobody spoke. The letter continued. "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was random. Someone wants people to stay away from the quarry. Someone keeps watching the road. They don't know I've been taking pictures." Rebecca looked toward the damaged camera, lying inside an evidence tray. Emily had been documenting something. Not by accident. On purpose. The question was no longer whether Emily had been abducted. The question had become, what exactly had she discovered? Investigators returned to Black Creek Quarry the following morning. The abandoned site sat nearly 2 miles beyond the old lumber mill, hidden behind dense pine forest and rusting security fences that had collapsed years earlier. Officially, quarry operations had ended in 1978. Unofficially, local residents claimed trucks continued entering the property late at night, well into the early 1980s. Most dismissed the stories as small-town rumors. Now, those rumors sounded very different. Ground-penetrating radar was brought to the site. The first scans revealed nothing unusual. The second revealed scattered metal debris left behind by decades of industrial work. Then the third skin stopped everyone. Roughly 6 feet beneath an area once used to store heavy equipment lay a large rectangular anomaly, too regular to be natural, too deep to be recent. Excavation began immediately. Hours passed. Layer after layer of compacted soil disappeared beneath excavator buckets. Finally, steel, workers uncovered the roof of a large shipping container buried beneath nearly 8 feet of earth. No records mentioned its existence. No permits had ever been issued. Someone had buried it deliberately. State police surrounded the excavation. Forensic specialists documented every inch before cutting to the rusted locking mechanism. When the heavy doors finally opened, investigators expected machinery, old equipment, industrial waste. Instead, they found shelves, boxes, plastic barrels, hundreds of neatly organized files sealed inside waterproof containers. The air inside carried the smell of damp paper and oil. Detectives stepped inside wearing protective suits. Every shelf held documents, invoices, payroll records, shipping manifests, photographs, maps, and one locked filing cabinet standing alone against a rear wall. The cabinet required nearly 30 minutes to force open. Inside rested dozens of employee personnel files from Black Creek Lumber Company. Each folder contained photographs, employment histories, medical records, addresses. Everything appeared ordinary until investigators noticed several names highlighted in red ink. One folder belonged to a truck mechanic named Thomas Granger. Another belonged to equipment operator Lewis Benton. A third belonged to security supervisor Arthur Doyle. 3 men, all deceased. All had died within 4 years after Emily disappeared. Official causes ranged from heart attacks to hunting accidents. Nothing suspicious, at least according to the original reports. Then investigators opened the 4th folder. There was no employee photograph, no employment application, only a single payroll sheet. Name, Daniel Mercer. Position, logistics coordinator. Employment dates, 1980 to 1982. A handwritten note had been attached with a paperclip. Remove after October. October, the same month Emily vanished. Rebecca immediately requested every public record connected to Daniel Mercer. Driver's license, property ownership, employment history, military service, tax records. The results made no sense. Daniel Mercer officially never worked for Black Creek Lumber Company. His name appeared nowhere in state employment databases. No tax records. No parufaidings. Nothing. Yet someone had been paying him every week for nearly 2 years. Cash. The financial trail ended there. Detectives interviewed former mill employees. Most remembered Daniel immediately. Quiet, tall, usually driving a dark Ford pickup. One retired foreman recalled something strange. He wasn't really one of us. What do you mean? He answered directly to the owner. Nobody knew exactly what he did. Another former employee remembered seeing Mercer arguing with Emily less than a week before she disappeared. The witness had never reported it. I figure it wasn't important. What were they arguing about? I couldn't hear everything. What did you hear? The old man looked toward the floor. She kept saying, "People are going to die if this gets out." Rebecca froze. What did Mercer say? He told her she was asking questions that didn't concern her. The interview ended in complete silence. Within days, investigators located Daniel Mercer, 73 years old, living quietly outside Bangor, widowed, retired, no criminal history. When detectives knocked on his front door, he appeared almost unsurprised. He looked at their badges, then quietly asked, "Is this about Emily?" Neither detective had mentioned her name. Rebecca watched his face carefully. Why would you assume that? Mercer closed his eyes. I knew someday somebody would come. He invited them inside. His house looked ordinary. Bookshelves, family photographs, fishing equipment. Nothing suggested a man connected to Maine's most famous disappearance. The interview lasted nearly 6 hours. Mercer denied harming Emily, denied seeing her the night she vanished, denied knowing anything about buried containers. But every answer sounded rehearsed, carefully measured, as if he had repeated them in his head for decades. Then Rebecca placed a recovered photograph from Emily's camera onto the table, the blurred image of the pickup truck. Mercer stared at it for nearly a full minute. His breathing changed. You recognize it? No. You're lying. No. Rebecca slid another photograph beside it, a restored image of Black Creek's employee parking lot taken in September 1981. The same truck, the same damage on the rear bumper, the same company-issued fuel tank. Mercer's hands began shaking. Still, he said nothing. Detectives left without making an arrest. There wasn't enough evidence. Not yet. 3 nights later, an unexpected visitor arrived at Augusta State Police headquarters. An elderly woman carrying a faded leather briefcase. Her name was Margaret Doyle, widow of former security supervisor Arthur Doyle. She asked specifically for Detective Sloan. I think my husband kept something he was afraid to destroy. Inside the briefcase rested an old cassette recorder, several labeled tapes, and a folded note dated November 1981. Margaret explained that Arthur became withdrawn after Emily disappeared. He drank heavily, barely slept, often woke screaming during the night. He refused to explain why. Before dying in 1993, he told Margaret, "If anyone ever starts asking about Black Creek again, give them the tapes." She had forgotten about them, until television reports announced the discovery beneath the quarry. Forensic technicians cleaned the cassette player carefully. The tape hissed loudly as decades of static filled the room. Then voices. 2 men, one unmistakably Arthur Doyle. The second, still unidentified. The recording quality was poor. Rain hammered against metal somewhere nearby. Engines idled in the background. Arthur spoke first. "We should tell somebody." Another voice answered. "It's too late. We can't keep burying this." A long silence followed. Then came 7 words that chilled everyone listening. "She saw the container before we moved it." The tape abruptly ended. Rebecca rewound it twice. 3 times. The sentence never changed. "She saw the container before we moved it." Investigators immediately returned to the buried shipping container beneath Black Creek. This time, they weren't searching for paperwork anymore. They were searching for whatever had been moved before Emily Carter disappeared. And beneath the steel floor of the container, ground-penetrating radar revealed another anomaly, smaller, older, hidden beneath reinforced concrete. Someone hadn't buried just one secret beneath Black Creek. They had buried 2. Excavation resumed before sunrise. Floodlights illuminated the abandoned quarry, while heavy machinery stood motionless around the buried container. State police sealed every entrance to the property. No reporters, no civilians, only investigators, forensic specialists, and a growing sense that they were standing above something that had remained hidden since the autumn of 1981. The anomaly beneath the container measured just under 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, too symmetrical to be natural. Concrete cutters were brought in before daylight. The reinforced slab beneath the shipping container proved far thicker than anyone expected. It took nearly 6 hours to remove it without disturbing whatever lay underneath. As the final section lifted away, the excavation site fell silent. There was another chamber, small, carefully constructed, concrete walls, concrete floor, no visible entrance except from above. Someone had built it first, then buried it, then placed a shipping container directly on top, layer after layer, as if making absolutely certain nobody would ever reach it. Forensic photographer Neil Morrison climbed down first. His flashlight swept slowly across the chamber. Dust, moisture, collapsed wooden shelves. Then something white near the far wall. Bone. Human. The excavation stopped immediately. The medical examiner's office assumed control. Every inch of the chamber was documented before anyone touched a single object. The skeleton rested against the wall, knees drawn toward the chest. Not buried, not scattered. Placed. A faded blue sweater still covered portions of the upper body. Fragments of denim remained around the legs. Near the right hand lay a rusted flashlight. Beside it, a leather notebook, still closed, still intact. Rebecca Sloan watched in complete silence. Nobody spoke the name everyone was thinking. They didn't have to. The clothing matched the description from 1981. The estimated height matched. The approximate age matched. But protocol demanded certainty. DNA testing would take time. For now, the remains were officially listed only as unknown female number 1. The notebook was carried separately to the laboratory. Unlike the journals recovered inside the toolbox, this one had been protected from water by the dry concrete chamber. The pages remained remarkably well preserved. The first page carried only one line. October 17th, 1981. If they find this, it means I was right. Rebecca carefully turned the page. Emily had written in short sentences. Quickly, almost as if she expected to be interrupted. The trucks arrive after midnight. The quarry isn't abandoned. The containers don't carry lumber. Daniel knows. Another page. Arthur looks terrified. Someone else give the orders. Another. I copied the shipping numbers. If anything happens, don't let them disappear. Every page answered one question, and created 2 more. Who was giving the orders? What exactly was inside the containers? And why had Emily been documenting everything instead of going directly to police? The answer appeared halfway through the notebook. I called the sheriff's office yesterday. They already knew. Rebecca stopped reading. The room became completely still. She read the sentence again. They already knew. If Emily's words were true, someone connected to law enforcement may have ignored or deliberately buried her report. That possibility changed everything. The investigation was no longer centered on a disappearance. It had become a possible conspiracy stretching back more than 40 years. State investigators immediately requested every surviving communication log from October 1981. Most had been destroyed decades earlier under normal retention policies. But one retired dispatcher remembered something unusual. A young teacher had indeed called late one afternoon asking to speak with a deputy. The dispatcher transferred the call. She never learned what happened afterward. The deputy who accepted that call, Sheriff Harold Bennett, had died in 1994. His personal files had never been examined. Within 48 hours, investigators obtained permission to search boxes stored by Bennett's surviving family. Inside an old attic, they found newspaper clippings, awards, photographs, routine paperwork. Nothing connected to Emily until one detective noticed a false bottom inside an old wooden trunk. Hidden beneath it, a single manila folder. No official markings. Inside were 3 documents. The first was Emily Carter's handwritten complaint, filed October 15, 1981, 2 days before she vanished. She reported repeated nighttime truck activity at Black Creek Quarry, despite the site being officially closed. She included license plate numbers, vehicle descriptions, dates, times. The complaint had never been logged into evidence, never assigned a case number, never investigated. The second document was even more disturbing. A handwritten note signed only with the initials HB. Leave Black Creek alone. Orders came from Augusta. The third document was a road map. One section had been circled repeatedly in red pencil. A narrow logging road running north from the quarry. Beside it, someone had written 2 words. Second site. Investigators mobilized immediately. The logging road had been abandoned for decades. Nature had almost erased it completely. Trees grew through sections of cracked pavement. Bridges had collapsed. Satellite imagery showed little beyond endless forest. Ground teams spent nearly 6 hours cutting their way toward the marked location. Around mid-afternoon, they found it. Another clearing. Another forgotten industrial site. Only this one had never appeared on any official maps. Concrete foundations, collapsed storage buildings, rusting fuel tanks, evidence that heavy machinery once operated there. Rebecca walked slowly across the clearing. Everything felt wrong. The site had been intentionally erased, buildings demolished, equipment removed, roads blocked, yet someone had taken extraordinary effort to hide its existence. Near one collapsed warehouse, forensic archaeologist Dr. Alan Pierce stopped abruptly. Soil disturbance. Rebecca joined him. The ground looked slightly uneven. Different vegetation. Different color. Exactly the kind of subtle change archaeologists learn to recognize. Ground radar confirmed several anomalies. Not 1, 5. Excavation began before sunset. The first pit contained broken machinery. The second held rusted barrels filled with construction debris. The third contained hundreds of burned paper fragments, business records, shipping documents, financial ledgers. Someone had destroyed them intentionally, but not completely. Forensic reconstruction specialists believe many pages could still be digitally restored. The fourth anomaly held nothing, only empty soil. Then came the fifth. Workers uncovered another steel hatch, smaller than the first, locked from above. Rebecca stared silently as bolt cutters snapped through decades of rust. The hatch opened with a loud metallic groan. A narrow ladder disappeared into darkness. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the unmistakable smell of damp concrete. Neil Morrison descended first. His flashlight swept across the underground room. Shelving lined both walls. Boxes, crates, metal cabinets. Unlike the first chamber, this one had never flooded. Everything remained exactly where it had been left. One cabinet stood open. Inside were dozens of reel-to-reel tapes. Every box carried handwritten dates. Rebecca lifted the nearest label. It read, Security Surveillance. At the rear of the room sat an industrial film projector. Beside it, a lock safe. Forensic technicians worked carefully for nearly 2 hours before opening it. Inside rested a thick stack of photographs, bundles of cash wrapped in deteriorating paper bands, several passports issued under different names, and one black ledger. No title, no company logo, only initials embossed in gold. BC. Rebecca opened the first page. Every line contained shipments, vehicle numbers, dates, payments. Beside certain entries appeared handwritten symbols. Some crossed out, some circled. Then she reached an entry dated October 17, 1981. The handwriting changed. Only one sentence had been added beneath the shipping record. Teacher interfered. Problem contained. No names. No explanation. Just 5 words. Rebecca slowly closed the ledger. The room around her had become unnaturally quiet. After 43 years, Emily Carter was no longer just a missing teacher. She had become the witness to something far larger than anyone had imagined. And somewhere, The person who wrote those 5 words might still be alive. Rebecca Sloan did not sleep that night. Neither did anyone assigned to the investigation. The discovery of the underground archive transformed a 43-year-old missing person case into one of the largest criminal investigations in Maine's history. The old narrative no longer fit the evidence. Emily Carter had not stumbled into a random act of violence. She had uncovered an organized operation. The question was no longer who took Emily. The question had become what was Black Creek really hiding. By dawn, forensic teams had transported every document, photograph, reel-to-reel tape, and ledger to a secure evidence facility in Augusta. Armed state troopers guarded the building around the clock. No information was released to the press. Not yet. Investigators wanted answers before the rumors began. The reel-to-reel recordings became the highest priority. Many of the tapes had deteriorated, but digital restoration specialists managed to recover portions of several recordings. The first contained nothing more than security camera footage from a warehouse loading dock. Silent, grainy, black and white, trucks arriving after midnight, workers unloading wooden crates. Nothing illegal, nothing remarkable. The second recording changed everything. It showed the same loading dock on October 12, 1981, 5 days before Emily disappeared. At exactly 11:43 p.m., a blue Chevrolet Nova entered the edge of the camera's frame. Emily's car. She remained inside for several minutes, watching. Then another vehicle entered, a black pickup truck. Rebecca immediately recognized a distinctive dent above the rear wheel. The same truck seen in Emily's damaged photograph. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. His face remained hidden beneath rain and poor image quality. But investigators noticed something else. He wasn't alone. A second vehicle arrived less than 30 seconds later. A white county sheriff's cruiser. No emergency lights. No siren. The cruiser parked beside the pickup. 2 men shook hands. Then both disappeared into the warehouse. Rebecca replayed the footage 3 times. 4, 5. The sheriff's vehicle remained unmistakable. Someone from local law enforcement had visited Black Creek during unauthorized nighttime operations. The restored image did not reveal the deputy's identity, only the vehicle number. Unit 204. State Archives identified the assigned driver within minutes. Deputy Michael Harlan, deceased. Heart attack. Another dead end, or so it seemed. Personnel records revealed Harlan had a patrol partner during much of 1981. Deputy Stephen Rollins, still alive, 76 years old, living in a nursing home outside Portland. Rebecca drove there personally. Rollins suffered from early dementia. His memory drifted unpredictably between decades. For nearly an hour, he struggled to remember simple questions. Then Rebecca placed a photograph of Black Creek Quarry on the table. Everything changed. Rollins stared at the image. His expression hardened. They buried her. Rebecca leaned forward. Who buried her? The wrong one. What do you mean? He looked confused, then whispered, they weren't supposed to bury the teacher. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Who was supposed to be buried? Rollins closed his eyes. For several long seconds, he said nothing. Finally, the accountant. Before Rebecca could ask another question, Rollins became agitated. Nurses entered the room. The interview ended. But one sentence refused to leave her mind. They weren't supposed to bury the teacher. That suggested something investigators had never considered. Perhaps Emily had not been the intended victim. Back in Augusta, forensic accountants began examining the financial ledgers recovered from the underground archive. The books documented shipments stretching back nearly a decade. Most involved lumber exports, paper products, heavy equipment, perfectly ordinary business, until analysts compared shipment dates against official customs records. Hundreds of shipments never existed. Truckloads entered Black Creek. Truckloads left Black Creek. None appeared in government databases. Entire convoys had moved through Maine without documentation. The payments connected to those shipments totaled millions of dollars. Cash. No taxes. No invoices. No oversight. Black Creek Lumber Company had apparently operated a massive smuggling network hidden behind legitimate logging operations. But what exactly was being transported? That answer emerged from one partially burned document recovered from the second underground site. After digital enhancement, several words became readable. Industrial solvents. Military surplus. Restricted chemical storage. Rebecca immediately contacted federal authorities. Within 24 hours, investigators from multiple agencies joined the task force. Environmental specialists examined soil samples collected around Black Creek. The results shocked everyone. Dangerous chemical residues remained buried beneath the property even after 4 decades. Illegal toxic waste, thousands of gallons, disposed of secretly instead of being processed legally. Emily had not uncovered a murder operation. She had uncovered an environmental crime worth millions of dollars. A crime powerful enough to silence anyone who threatened it. Suddenly, everything made sense. The nighttime truck traffic, the hidden containers, the secret financial records, the unexplained payments. Emily had simply looked too closely, and someone decided she could not be allowed to talk. Attention returned to Daniel Mercer. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his property. Mercer watched quietly as investigators entered his home. He offered no resistance, no anger, only exhaustion. Inside a locked basement storage room, officers discovered dozens of old filing boxes, receipts, maps, vehicle maintenance logs. Most appeared harmless, until one investigator noticed a faded spiral notebook tucked beneath a shelf. The handwriting belonged to Mercer. The entries were brief, practical, emotionless. October 9th, 1981. Teacher seen photographing trucks. October 11th. Owner informed. October 14th. Sheriff contacted. October 17th. No complete sentence. Only 2 words. Too late. Rebecca confronted Mercer immediately. She placed a notebook on his kitchen table. You've been lying for weeks. Mercer looked down at the pages. I know. Who wrote? Teacher interfered. Problem contained the ledger? Silence. Was it you? No. Then who? Mercer's eyes filled with tears for the first time. The owner. What owner? Richard Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Rebecca. No Richard Blackwood appeared in Black Creek Lumber's corporate records. No ownership filings. No tax documents. Nothing. Mercer gave a tired smile. That's because he never officially existed. According to Mercer, Blackwood controlled the company through shell corporations and intermediaries. Nobody questioned him. Nobody challenged him. Sheriffs, business leaders, contractors, everyone answered to Blackwood. He owned half the county. Where is he now? Mercer looked toward the window. Dead. When? Supposedly. 1987. Rebecca noticed a hesitation. Supposedly? Mercer nodded slowly. There wasn't a funeral. No death certificate? I never saw one. You think he's alive? Mercer didn't answer. He didn't need to. Investigators immediately searched national databases. No confirmed death record. No veria permit. No Social Security termination. Richard Blackwood had vanished from official history almost as completely as Emily Carter. Then another surprise arrived. Forensic anthropologists completed preliminary analysis of the skeletal remains recovered beneath the concrete chamber. The remains belonged to a woman between 25 and 30 years old. Height consistent with Emily Carter. Dental records matched. The DNA comparison would take another several days. But investigators already knew. After 43 years, Emily Carter had finally been found. Yet one detail deeply troubled the medical examiner. The skeleton showed no obvious fatal injury. No gunshot wounds. No naive trauma. No broken bones associated with violent assault. Cause of death remained impossible to determine. Rebecca stood silently inside the laboratory. Emily had been locked inside a hidden concrete chamber, with her notebook, her flashlight, nothing else. The horrifying possibility slowly formed. What if Emily hadn't been murdered immediately? What if she had been left alive? The room suddenly felt much colder. If that theory proved correct, the truth about October 17th, 1981, was even darker than anyone had imagined. The discovery of Emily Carter's remains changed the investigation forever. For 43 years, her family had lived with uncertainty. They imagined every possible ending: a hidden escape, a secret life, a chance that she might somehow return. But the truth investigators uncovered was far more painful. Emily had never left Maine. She had never disappeared by choice. She had been hidden, buried beneath concrete and stone, while an entire community searched for answers. The official announcement came 3 days after the remains were identified. News helicopters arrived above Ashbrook. Reporters surrounded the courthouse. The headline appeared across the country: May 1981 cold case cracked. Buried evidence shocks investigators. The word spread quickly, but behind the headline was a family receiving the answer they had waited their entire lives to hear. Emily Carter was finally coming home. Her parents were gone. Her father had died believing the case might never be solved. Her mother had passed away years earlier, still keeping Emily's photograph beside her bed. Her younger brother, Thomas, was the only immediate family member alive to receive the news. When investigators visited him, they expected anger. They expected questions. Instead, Thomas sat silently for several minutes, holding the old photograph he had carried since 1981. Finally, he whispered, "I always knew she didn't leave us." Those words stayed with investigators, because Thomas had been right. Emily had never abandoned anyone. Someone had taken her away. The forensic examination continued. The medical examiner discovered something that made the investigation even more disturbing. The position of Emily's remains suggested she had been placed carefully inside the chamber, not hidden in panic, not abandoned randomly. Someone had prepared the location beforehand. The concrete room was not an accident. It was a plan. The chamber had been constructed months, possibly years, before Emily disappeared, meaning someone had already created a place where evidence could vanish. The investigation expanded immediately. Search warrants were issued for every remaining property connected to Black Creek Lumber Company. Former executives, contractors, employees, anyone connected to the operation. Many names appeared. Some were dead. Some had moved away. Some refused interviews. But one name continued appearing: Richard Blackwood, the man who officially did not exist. Investigators spent weeks rebuilding his identity. They discovered he had operated through dozens of false names. He purchased property using corporations that dissolved within months. He controlled businesses without appearing on paperwork. He was a ghost, a man who existed everywhere and nowhere. Then investigators found the first photograph, hidden inside the underground archive. A black and white image taken during a company gathering in 1979. Employees standing outside Black Creek headquarters. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then forensic specialists enlarged the image. A man standing behind the group, half hidden, wearing a dark coat. The face was clear enough: Richard Blackwood. But the date underneath the photograph created a problem. The image had been labeled October 1985, 6 years after investigators believed Blackwood had disappeared. The photograph proved something impossible. Someone had continued using his identity, or Richard Blackwood had never left. The case became even more complex when investigators received a sealed envelope from a retired accountant named Walter Crane. Crane had worked with Black Creek for 11 years. He contacted police after seeing the news about Emily. "I should have spoken decades ago," he said. Inside the envelope was a handwritten statement. Crane described Blackwood as a man who controlled everything from behind the scenes. He never signed papers. He never attended official meetings. He never wanted his name recorded. He trusted only a small group. The statement listed 3 names: Daniel Mercer, Arthur Doyle, Sheriff Harold Bennett. The same 3 names already connected to the investigation. But Crane included another detail, a 4th name, a person nobody had mentioned before: Evelyn Shaw. According to Crane, Evelyn Shaw managed Blackwood's financial records. She handled payments, created shell companies, moved money. She was the person who knew where everything was hidden. Investigators searched for Evelyn Shaw. The results were immediate. She was alive, 71 years old, living in Vermont, working as a private financial consultant, a person who had spent 4 decades avoiding attention. When detectives arrived at her home, Evelyn did not seem surprised. She looked at their badges, then at the photograph they carried, the image of the underground ledger. Her expression changed. "You found it." Rebecca noticed the wording. Not, "What did you find?" Not, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You found it." Inside the interview room, Evelyn remained calm. Unlike Daniel Mercer, she did not appear afraid. She appeared tired, as if she had been waiting. "You all think this is about Emily Carter." Rebecca stared at her. "It is about Emily Carter." "No." Evelyn shook her head. "Emily was the beginning." "What does that mean?" "It means you still don't understand what she found." Rebecca placed a recovered notebook on the table. She found illegal dumping. Evelyn laughed quietly. "No." "Then what?" Evelyn leaned forward. She found the reason people were willing to kill. The room became silent. For the first time, Evelyn revealed details about Black Creek's hidden operation, the toxic waste, the illegal shipments, the stolen materials. They were all real, but they were only part of it. According to Evelyn, Blackwood was involved in something much larger. He wasn't just hiding crimes. He was collecting leverage, information, secrets, records on powerful people throughout Maine, politicians, business owners, law enforcement officials. Black Creek was not only a company, it was a network, and Emily had discovered the archive containing evidence against everyone involved. "She photographed the wrong container," Evelyn said. Rebecca leaned closer. "What container?" "The one that wasn't supposed to exist." The investigators returned to the underground archive. They reviewed every recovered document again. One crate had been mislabeled, not with a company code, not with a shipping number, just a single word, personal. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes, photographs, written statements, names, dates, payments, evidence collected by Blackwood over years, blackmail material, the kind of information that could destroy careers, the kind of information that could make powerful people desperate. And among those records was one final item, a tape recorded on October 17, 1981, the night Emily disappeared. Investigators gathered around the audio equipment. The tape began with static, then a vehicle engine, then Emily's voice. Weak, far away, but unmistakable. "Someone needs to know what they're doing here." A man's voice responded. "You should have walked away." Emily replied, "I tried." The man's voice became colder. "You should have tried harder." A pause. Then Emily said something that made every investigator stop breathing. "I know who you work for." The recording ended. Only 23 seconds. 23 seconds that changed everything. Because now investigators knew. Emily Carter had not discovered Black Creek by accident. She had discovered someone. Someone who had spent decades ensuring nobody would ever expose the truth. And somewhere in the middle of that recording was the voice of the person who ended her life. The audio recording became the center of the entire investigation. For decades, investigators had searched for a physical connection, a weapon, a witness, a confession, something that could explain what happened on the night Emily Carter disappeared. Now, they had something far more powerful. A voice preserved through 43 years of silence. A voice that had been trapped on magnetic tape, waiting for someone to listen. The forensic audio team spent days restoring the recording. Every second was analyzed, every sound examined. The background noise revealed details that had previously gone unnoticed. Rain hitting metal, a vehicle engine running nearby, a distant mechanical hum. Then another sound, a slow, repeating metallic tone. Investigators compared it against historical records from Black Creek. The answer came quickly. The bell belonged to an old warning system used at the quarry, a system activated whenever heavy machinery moved near restricted areas. The recording had been made at Black Creek Quarry, not somewhere else, not later, on the property where Emily was eventually found. The timeline was becoming clearer. Emily had gone there willingly. She had followed someone, or she had been taken there after discovering the operation. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Who was speaking to her? The voice analysis began immediately. The database search returned no official match. No criminal records. No law enforcement records. Nothing. The voice was a ghost, just like Richard Blackwood. But investigators noticed something. The voice sounded familiar to several people connected to the case. When Daniel Mercer heard the recording, he refused to comment. He simply stared at the floor. After several minutes, he finally whispered. He wasn't supposed to be there. Rebecca looked at him. Who? Mercer closed his eyes. Blackwood. The answer created another mystery. If Richard Blackwood was a person speaking to Emily, why had everyone spent decades believing he disappeared? Investigators reopened every record connected to Blackwood. Birth certificates, school documents, employment files, property purchases. Almost everything was fake. But one document survived. A passport application from 1968. The photograph was different. The name was different. But the fingerprints matched. Richard Blackwood existed. He had simply spent his life removing himself from official records. He was not a ghost. He was a man who understood how to become invisible. The investigation then turned toward finding out what happened after October 17, 1981. The answer came from an unexpected source. A retired highway worker named Carl Whitmore contacted police after watching a news report about the case. He claimed he had information about the night Emily disappeared. For decades, he had remained silent, not because he didn't know, because he was afraid. Carl was 80 years old when detectives interviewed him. His hands shook as he held a cup of coffee. I thought I could forget it. What did you see? That night, I was repairing a section of road near the quarry. The highway project had been delayed by heavy rain. Carl remembered seeing a vehicle convoy after midnight. 3 trucks, a black pickup, and a sheriff's cruiser. Why didn't you report it? Carl looked down. Because the sheriff was there. The room went silent. Carl continued. I saw a woman being taken from the pickup. Rebecca froze. Was she alive? Carl swallowed. Yes. Are you sure? I heard her. What did she say? Carl closed his eyes. I heard her shout one thing. What? She said. They'll find the records. The words matched Emily's behavior. She wasn't focused on saving herself. She was focused on exposing what she had found. Carl provided one more detail. A 4th vehicle. A dark sedan. Driven by a woman. He remembered because the driver got out and spoke directly with Blackwood. A woman. Calm. Confident. Someone who appeared to be in control. Investigators immediately connected the description. Evelyn Shaw. But Evelyn had denied being at Black Creek that night. When confronted with Carl's testimony, her story changed. She admitted she had been there, but claimed she arrived after Emily was already gone. I went there because I wanted to stop him. Stop who? Richard. Why? Because he went too far. Rebecca studied her carefully. Did you know Emily? Evelyn hesitated, then answered, yes. That was the first time anyone connected to the investigation admitted knowing Emily before her disappearance. Evelyn explained that Emily had approached her weeks earlier, not as a suspect, as someone seeking help. Emily believed the financial records she discovered could expose Blackwood's entire operation. She believed Evelyn might be willing to cooperate, but Emily misunderstood. Evelyn had not been trapped by Blackwood. She had benefited from him. For years. The money, the influence, the protection. Until Emily discovered the archive. Then everything changed. Why did she trust you? Rebecca asked. Evelyn looked away. Because she thought people were better than they really were. That sentence became one of the most haunting statements in the investigation, because Emily's greatest mistake may not have been investigating Black Creek. It may have been believing someone inside the operation would help her. The evidence suggested that on the night she disappeared, Emily attempted to meet Evelyn. Instead, Blackwood arrived. He knew. Someone had warned him. Someone had betrayed Emily. The investigation narrowed toward the final hours of her life. Phone records from 1981 were reviewed. Many had been lost, but one handwritten log from the local telephone exchange remained. At 7:12 p.m. on October 17th, Emily's home number received a call. The caller was unidentified. The duration, for minutes and 16 seconds. The operator who recorded the call wrote one note. Female caller sounded distressed. Investigators searched for any woman connected to Black Creek. Only one remained, Evelyn Shaw. When questioned again, Evelyn admitted making the call. She claimed she warned Emily. I told her to leave town. Why? Because Richard knew. What did he know? That she had copies. Copies of what? Evelyn looked toward the detectives. The complete archive. Investigators returned to the underground chamber. They searched every box again, every file, every hidden compartment. The archive was incomplete. Someone had removed items before the police arrived. Missing, one ledger, one collection of photographs, and one final tape. The tape recorded after Emily's disappearance. The tape that might explain everything. The missing evidence became the new focus, because investigators realized something terrifying. Someone had accessed Black Creek recently. The underground archive was not untouched for 40 years. Someone had been there, and they had been there after the investigation began. Security footage from the evidence site showed nothing. No forced entry. No alarmstrigger, which meant whoever entered knew exactly how to get inside. Someone with knowledge. Someone connected. Then came the discovery that changed the direction of the case again. A fingerprint lifted from the inside of the underground archive, not from 1981 evidence. Fresh, recent, the print was entered into the national database. The result returned within hours. The person who had entered the hidden archive was not Richard Blackwood, not Daniel Mercer, not Evelyn Shaw. The fingerprint belonged to a former Maine State Police investigator, a man who had worked on Emily Carter's original disappearance case, Detective Samuel Briggs. The name on the fingerprint report changed everything. For several minutes, nobody inside the investigation room spoke. The result appeared impossible. Detective Samuel Briggs, the same investigator who had spent decades claiming he believed Emily Carter's case had been mishandled, the same man who carried copies of the file home after retirement, the same man who told colleagues that someone had made a mistake. Now his fingerprint had been discovered inside a hidden underground archive, connected to the very crime he spent his life trying to solve. The room filled with questions. Was Briggs protecting someone? Was he involved? Had he known the truth all along? Or was there another explanation? Rebecca Sloan refused to jump to conclusions. 40 years of investigating cold cases had taught her one thing. Evidence reveals facts, but facts without context can create the wrong story. The fingerprint needed a timeline. That became the priority. Forensic specialists examined the print again. The first conclusion remained unchanged. It was Samuel Briggs. But another detail emerged. The print was not on one of the original documents. It was on the inside edge of the underground archive's steel door. The location suggested something important. Whoever entered the room had touched the door while leaving, not while searching, not while opening boxes, while exiting. That meant Briggs had likely entered after the archive had already been discovered. But why? Investigators immediately searched for information about Briggs after his retirement. They found something unexpected. He had continued reviewing Emily's case until his death in 2016. His family had donated his personal files to a local historical archive. A search warrant revealed dozens of notebooks, maps, photographs, handwritten theories. Briggs had spent more than 30 years chasing answers. But one thing stood out. Several pages were missing, not torn out, removed carefully. The missing pages came from the final years of his investigation, between 2008 and 2012, the exact period when Briggs first began connecting Black Creek to larger criminal activity. His family insisted they knew nothing about the missing pages. Then investigators found a letter, hidden inside the cover of one notebook, written by Briggs, dated 3 months before his death. It read, "If they ever find the chamber, they must know the first discovery was not the final discovery." Rebecca read the sentence repeatedly. The first discovery was not the final discovery. Briggs knew something else existed, something beyond the underground archive, something he had never revealed. The investigation returned to his old case notes. A pattern appeared. For decades, Briggs had been searching not only for Emily, he had been searching for whoever controlled Black Creek. His notes repeatedly mentioned one phrase: the second hand. No explanation, no details, just those words. Investigators contacted Briggs' former colleagues. Most had no idea what it meant, except one, retired Detective Alan Pierce. He had worked alongside Briggs in the early 1980s. When asked about the second hand, his expression changed immediately. "You found that. What does it mean?" Pierce hesitated, then answered. Briggs believed Blackwood wasn't working alone. Who was the second hand? He never knew. Why didn't he tell anyone? Pierce looked uncomfortable, because he thought someone inside the department was listening. That statement reopened every suspicion surrounding the original investigation. Someone had buried Emily's complaint. Someone had ignored evidence. Someone had allowed Black Creek to continue. But was that person still alive? Investigators examined old police records again. One name appeared repeatedly: Sheriff Harold Bennett, the man who had received Emily's complaint, the man whose hidden folder contained the map to Black Creek, the man who died in 1994. But the investigation uncovered something strange about his death. The official report stated that Bennett suffered a fatal heart attack while fishing alone. However, the autopsy records showed something unusual. A sedative had been present in his system. A small amount, not enough to cause death, but enough to raise questions. The original investigators had never focused on it, because at the time, Bennett was considered a respected public figure. Nobody wanted to believe something darker. Now, everything was being questioned. The team began reviewing every death connected to Black Creek: Thomas Granger, Lewis Benton, Arthur Doyle, Harold Bennett, for men, all connected to the operation, all dead within 15 years. At first, investigators believed it was coincidence. Then they discovered a pattern. Each death occurred shortly after that person attempted to reveal information about Blackwood. Arthur Doyle had recorded his confession. Harold Bennett had hidden Emily's complaint. Thomas Granger had contacted a reporter. Lewis Benton had tried to sell company records. Each person who moved toward the truth disappeared from the story. Some died. Some vanished. Some stayed silent. The question became terrifying. Was someone eliminating loose ends? The investigation turned back toward Richard Blackwood. Despite thousands of records searched, no confirmed death existed. No grave, no obituary, no family statement. Nothing. A person who supposedly died had simply disappeared. Investigators expanded the search nationwide. Then they found a possible match. A man named Robert Blake, born 1949, financial consultant, no criminal record, living in Oregon. The photograph was different. The name was different. But facial recognition software detected similarities. The investigators requested additional records. The answer arrived 2 days later. Robert Blake and Richard Blackwood shared the same fingerprint pattern. The impossible became possible. Richard Blackwood was alive. He had spent decades living under another identity, and he was only one state away. The FBI joined the investigation. A surveillance operation began. Robert Blake lived quietly in a small coastal town. He walked every morning, bought groceries, maintained his garden. Neighbors described him as polite, generous, a respected member of the community. Nobody knew his past. Nobody knew the name Richard Blackwood. until investigators approached his home. The moment he opened the door, he looked directly at the agents. Then he smiled, not surprised, not afraid, almost relieved. You finally found the archive. The agents froze. Nobody had mentioned the archive. Inside the house, investigators discovered dozens of documents, old company records, photographs, financial reports, and one item that shocked everyone, a cassette tape, label, Emily Carter, final statement. The tape had been hidden for 43 years. Blackwood had kept it, not destroyed it, kept it as if it was something valuable. Investigators transported him for questioning. For the first hour, he said nothing. Then Rebecca Sloan entered the room. She placed the tape recorder on the table. You kept her voice. Blackwood stared at the device. You have no idea what she was. She was a teacher. No. He looked up. She was a witness. Rebecca pressed the record button. Emily's voice filled the room. If someone finds this, please understand. The tape cut off. Static. Then Blackwood whispered. She wasn't supposed to survive that night. Rebecca stared at him. What happened? For the first time in 43 years, Richard Blackwood began telling the truth. But before he could explain everything, one question remained unanswered. Why did Samuel Briggs enter the archive after the discovery? And what had he found there that he was willing to take to his grave? The confession of Richard Blackwood was not the ending investigators expected. They believed finding him would close the final chapter. They believed the missing pieces would finally fall into place. Instead, his first words created an even deeper mystery. Because Blackwood did not deny knowing Emily. He did not deny Black Creek. He did not deny the hidden archives. He admitted everything. But he claimed the story everyone believed was wrong. According to Blackwood, Emily Carter was never supposed to die. After 43 years of silence, after decades of unanswered questions, the man accused of destroying Emily's life was now claiming he was not responsible for her death. Rebecca Sloan leaned forward, then explained the chamber. Blackwood remained calm. The chamber was not built for her. Someone was going to use it. Who? He looked toward the recording device. The people who wanted everything buried. The interview lasted nearly 12 hours. Every statement was checked against evidence. Every name was compared against records. Blackwood described Black Creek Lumber Company as a front, not just for illegal dumping, not just for smuggling, but for collecting information, documents, photographs, recordings, secrets. He claimed powerful people used Black Creek because nobody questioned a logging company operating deep in the Maine wilderness. The quarry became a place where things could disappear. Money, evidence, people. But Blackwood insisted he was not the person controlling everything. He said he was only one part of a much larger network. Rebecca immediately challenged him. You expect us to believe you were just a victim? Blackwood looked at her. No. The answer surprised her. I was guilty. The room went silent. I did terrible things. Then why should anyone believe you now? Because I know what happened to Emily. Blackwood explained that in October 1981, Emily discovered the hidden archive beneath Black Creek. She photographed the containers, copied records, recorded conversations. But what she did not know was that someone else was already watching her. Someone inside the investigation. Someone who knew every move police were making. That person contacted Blackwood. They told him Emily had to be stopped. Blackwood claimed he agreed to confront her. Not kill her, confront her. But when he arrived at the quarry, Emily was already there, and someone else was waiting. Rebecca asked, Who? Blackwood hesitated. For the first time, he looked afraid. The man who followed her from the beginning. Name, Samuel Briggs. The room froze. The same detective whose fingerprint had been found inside the archive. The same detective who had spent decades searching for Emily. Blackwood claimed Briggs was not the investigator. He appeared to be. He was part of the operation. Rebecca immediately rejected the accusation. Briggs dedicated his life to finding her. Blackwood nodded. That's why he was dangerous. Explain. He knew what happened. He knew he had control of the story. So he became the man searching for the truth. The accusation seemed impossible, but then investigators reviewed Briggs' original case files again. They discovered something disturbing. Several pieces of evidence from 1981 had never been entered into official records. A photograph, a witness statement, a vehicle description, all connected to Black Creek, evidence that only the lead investigator would have had access to. The missing pages from Briggs' notebooks suddenly became more important. What had he removed? The search of Briggs' former home revealed a hidden compartment inside his basement wall. Inside were documents sealed inside plastic bags. Old evidence, not from Emily's case, from Black Creek. Among the documents was a photograph dated October 17, 1981. The image showed the quarry entrance, 3 vehicles, a sheriff's cruiser, a black pickup, and Briggs' personal government-issued vehicle. The photograph proved Briggs had been at the scene, but it did not prove murder. The investigation needed more. Then came the discovery of the final tape, the tape labeled, Emily Carter, Final Statement. Audio specialists restored it. The first few seconds were filled with static. Then Emily spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear. If someone is listening to this, I need you to understand one thing. A pause. Everyone thinks the danger is outside. A breath. It's not. The recording continued. I thought I could trust someone who wanted to help me. Static. I was wrong. Another pause. The person who gave me information. Emily stopped. The sound of footsteps appeared in the background. A door opening. Then Emily whispered, "No." The tape captured a man's voice. Not Blackwood. Not Mercer. A different voice. The man said, "You should have stayed out of this." Emily replied, "You were supposed to protect people." The man answered, "I protected the right people." Then the recording ended. Investigators sent the voice for comparison. The result arrived 24 hours later. The voice matched archive recordings of Samuel Briggs, the detective who searched for Emily, the detective who claimed he never stopped looking, the detective whose fingerprint was found inside the hidden archive. The evidence was overwhelming, but investigators still needed to understand why. Why would a respected detective do this? Why spend decades pretending to search? The answer came from another discovery. A hidden financial account, opened in 1981, closed in 2016, the year Briggs died. The account contained payments totaling nearly $2 million. The source? A series of shell companies connected to Black Creek for 43 years. Samuel Briggs had been receiving money. The investigator was not hunting the secret. He was protecting it. But one question remained. Why did he keep searching? Why reopen files? Why spend decades following clues that could expose him? The answer came from Daniel Mercer. When investigators confronted him with the evidence, he finally broke. He revealed the truth about Briggs. Briggs wasn't loyal. What does that mean? He wasn't protecting Blackwood. Then who was he protecting? Mercer looked terrified. The person above him. Mercer lowered his voice. The person who started everything. Rebecca stared at him. Richard Blackwood? Mercer shook his head. No. Then who? Mercer looked toward the window and whispered a name investigators had never expected. Emily Carter's father. The room went silent. A new possibility emerged. The case everyone thought they understood had another hidden layer. Emily was not just a witness. She may have been connected to the operation long before she discovered it. Her disappearance was not only about what she found. It was about who she was. And as investigators reopened the oldest records connected to the Carter family, they discovered something buried for decades, a secret that changed everything about the night Emily vanished. The name of Emily Carter's father changed the entire direction of the investigation. For 43 years, investigators have viewed Thomas Carter as a grieving father, a man who searched, a man who begged police to keep looking, a man who stood beside his wife in front of cameras, asking anyone with information to come forward. The community remembered him as a victim. But now, hidden records suggested something impossible. Thomas Carter had a connection to Black Creek, not after Emily disappeared, before. The investigation team returned to the original case files. Every document connected to Emily's family was reviewed again: birth certificates, employment records, financial history, old interviews. Most appeared ordinary, until one document caught Rebecca Sloan's attention. A property transfer from 1976. The buyer was listed as Thomas Carter. The property, a small section of land bordering Black Creek Quarry. The transaction had never been considered suspicious because Thomas sold the land 6 months later. At the time, investigators assumed it was unrelated. Now it looked different. Rebecca traced a buyer who purchased the property after Thomas, a company called Northern Timber Holdings, one of the same shell corporations connected to Richard Blackwood. The connection was undeniable. Emily's father had owned land directly connected to Black Creek, and he had sold it to the very network Emily later investigated. The question was immediate. Did Thomas know? Investigators searched deeper. They discovered Thomas Carter had worked as an accountant before becoming a school administrator, a profession that suddenly seemed important because the Black Creek operation relied on financial records, hidden payments, false companies, missing money. Someone with accounting knowledge would have been valuable. The evidence suggested Thomas may not have been a random outsider. He may have been involved from the beginning. Rebecca struggled with the possibility, because the case had always been built around one simple belief. A daughter disappeared. A father searched for answers. But what if the father knew more than he admitted? The investigators located old business records from the late 1970s. Most had been destroyed, but one surviving document changed everything. A consulting agreement, signed by Thomas Carter. The client, Black Creek Lumber Company. The date, 3 years before Emily disappeared. The document was brief. No details, only payment information. Thomas Carter had received money from Black Creek, the same company that would later become connected to Emily's disappearance. The discovery caused immediate conflict within the investigation team. Some believed Thomas was involved. Others believed he had been forced into cooperation. Rebecca refused to choose a theory without evidence. She returned to the one person who knew the truth about the early years, Richard Blackwood. When confronted with Thomas Carter's name, Blackwood became quiet. For the first time since his arrest, he appeared genuinely emotional. "You found him." Rebecca stared at him. "Found who?" "Her father." "What about him?" Blackwood looked down. "He was the reason I noticed Emily." The statement shocked investigators. "What does that mean?" Blackwood explained that Thomas Carter had not simply worked for Black Creek. He had helped build the financial structure that allowed it to exist. But years later, Thomas became afraid. He wanted out. According to Blackwood, Thomas began secretly copying documents, preparing evidence, planning to expose the operation. But before he could act, Emily discovered the same information. She continued where her father stopped. Rebecca asked, "Are you saying Emily was investigating her own father?" Blackwood shook his head. "No." "Then what?" "She was investigating what happened to him." The statement created another mystery, because according to official records, Thomas Carter died in 1986. A heart attack, a natural death, but investigators now questioned everything. They reviewed his medical records, the death certificate, the hospital reports. Nothing appeared unusual until they found one detail. The doctor who signed the death certificate had also received payments from Black Creek. Another connection, another hidden thread. The deeper investigators went, the larger the conspiracy became. Then came the discovery inside Thomas Carter's old house. The property had remained in family ownership for decades. When Emily's brother Thomas Jr. agreed to a search, investigators examined the attic. Behind old wooden panels, they found a hidden compartment. Inside, a tape recorder, several handwritten letters, and a photograph. The photograph showed 3 people standing outside Black Creek offices in 1979. Richard Blackwood, Samuel Briggs, Thomas Carter. 3 men who were supposed to have no connection. 3 men who had shaped Emily's entire life. The first letter was addressed to Emily, never delivered. The handwriting belonged to her father. It read, "Emily, if you find this, it means I failed to protect you." Rebecca continued reading. "I spent years believing I could control what I helped create. I was wrong. People like Blackwood do not allow people to leave." Another page. "Briggs knows everything. He has always known." Another. "If something happens to me, do not trust the investigation." The investigators stopped, because Emily had written almost the exact same warning years later. Do not trust the investigation. Father and daughter had both discovered the same truth. The system meant to find answers had been compromised. The final letter contained one sentence that changed the entire case. The person above Blackwood is someone nobody will suspect because everyone thinks he is a victim. Everyone looked at the same name. Thomas Carter, Emily's father, the man who spent decades being remembered as a grieving parent, the man who may have been at the center of the operation. But then forensic analysts examined the handwriting. The letter had been written shortly before Thomas Carter's death, and one sentence appeared different. The ink, the pressure, the handwriting style. Someone had added it later. The sentence accusing Thomas. Someone had modified the letter. Someone wanted investigators to believe the father was responsible. The question changed again. Who altered the evidence? The answer came from DNA testing on the paper. A partial fingerprint. Not Thomas Carter. Not Richard Blackwood. Not Samuel Briggs. The print belonged to someone else. A person who had never appeared in the investigation. A person who had been hiding behind the entire case. The database search returned a match. Rebecca stared at it. Everyone in the room went silent because the person connected to the hidden letter was someone they never expected. Someone who had been helping solve the case. Someone who had access to every piece of evidence. Someone who had guided the investigation from the beginning. The fingerprint belonged to Detective Rebecca Sloan. The fingerprint result created a silence inside the investigation room that lasted nearly a minute. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The name on the report seemed impossible. Detective Rebecca Sloan, the lead investigator, the person who reopened Emily Carter's case, the person who uncovered Black Creek, the person who had spent months chasing the truth. Now her own fingerprint was connected to a hidden alteration inside the evidence that changed everything. But Rebecca knew something the others did not. She had never touched that letter before. At least, not consciously. The forensic team immediately began reviewing the timeline. When was the fingerprint deposited? Was it from 1981? Could it have been transferred decades later? Could the evidence have been contaminated? The first assumption was contamination. The second was a mistake. The third was something nobody wanted to consider. Someone had planted it. Because if Rebecca's fingerprint was intentionally placed on the document, then someone was sending a message, not just hiding evidence, controlling the investigation. Rebecca voluntarily stepped away from the active case. She surrendered her access badge, her weapon, her investigative files. For the first time in months, she was no longer leading the search. She was part of it. The department assigned an independent review team. Every action Rebecca had taken was examined. Every interview, every evidence transfer, every location she visited. And slowly, a disturbing pattern appeared. Rebecca had not planted evidence. She had been manipulated. Someone had guided her towards certain discoveries. The underground archive, the hidden chamber, the missing documents. Every major breakthrough had followed information that appeared naturally. But now investigators noticed something. The clues were not random. They were arranged. Someone wanted the investigation to move in a specific direction. Someone wanted Rebecca to uncover the truth, but only certain parts of it. The question became, who was leading her? The answer came from an old piece of evidence recovered from Samuel Briggs' personal files. A notebook page, previously ignored. The handwriting belonged to Briggs. The date. The entry was only 4 sentences. The case will reopen eventually. When it does, They will follow the trail I created. She will find the archive. She will finish what I couldn't. The investigators stared at the page. Briggs had predicted Rebecca years before she was assigned to the case. How? The answer was hidden in her own history. Before joining the cold case division, Rebecca had worked as a forensic analyst. Her first major assignment involved reviewing archived evidence from old investigations, including Maine State Police files from the 1980s, including Black Creek. She had unknowingly reviewed Emily Carter's evidence 15 years earlier, and Briggs had noticed her. He had followed her career. He believed she was the only investigator capable of exposing the truth. But that created another question. If Briggs wanted the truth revealed, why had he helped hide it? The answer came from the final pages of his journal, the pages that had been removed. The missing pages were found inside an old storage locker registered under a false name. Inside were photographs, documents, and a letter addressed to Rebecca. The letter began, "If you're reading this, I am already gone." Briggs admitted everything. He admitted taking money from Black Creek. He admitted hiding evidence. He admitted protecting powerful people. But he claimed he was not the person who controlled the operation. He wrote, "I was weak. I was afraid. I convinced myself I was protecting my family. In reality, I was protecting criminals." Another page. Emily Carter was the moment everything changed. Another. She reminded me of who I was supposed to be. Briggs explained that after Emily disappeared, he realized what Blackwood's organization had become. It was no longer about money. It was about control. Anyone who threatened the network became disposable, including him. He spent decades gathering evidence secretly, waiting, preparing, but he could not expose the truth himself, because nobody would believe a corrupt detective accusing the people he once protected. So he created a trail designed for someone else to follow, someone with no connection to the original investigation, someone like Rebecca. But the letter contained one final warning. Do not trust the person who appears to know the most. Investigators immediately understood. There was still someone hiding, someone who had survived every investigation, every search, every revelation. The person above Blackwood, the person who had controlled the operation. The investigation returned to the old financial records, the shell companies, the hidden accounts, the payments. Every path eventually led to one organization, a private investment firm created in 1975. The founder's name appeared on the original registration documents, a name nobody had noticed before, because it was buried beneath layers of corporate paperwork. The founder was Eleanor Voss, a respected philanthropist, a woman known across Maine for funding schools, hospitals, and community programs. A woman who had publicly supported the search for Emily Carter. A woman who had donated money to help solve the case. For 43 years, Eleanor Voss had been viewed as one of the people trying to find the truth. But investigators discovered something horrifying. She had also been one of the people hiding it. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, corporate documents, private communications. Her signature appeared everywhere. Black Creek was not Richard Blackwood's operation. Blackwood was the operator. Briggs was a protector. But Eleanor Voss was the architect, the woman who built the system. When investigators arrived at her mansion outside Portland, she was waiting, almost as if she knew they were coming. She invited them inside. No panic, no escape attempt, no denial. She looked at the investigators and smiled. You finally understood. Rebecca, now watching from outside the official investigation, heard the statement later. It became one of the most chilling moments of the case, because Eleanor Voss was not surprised. She was not afraid. She had spent 43 years believing the truth would never reach her. During the interview, she admitted controlling Black Creek, but she denied killing Emily. She claimed Emily's death was caused by panic, a mistake, a tragedy. Rebecca knew better, because the final evidence had not yet been revealed. Inside the original underground archive, investigators discovered one last hidden compartment, a small metal box welded beneath the floor. Inside was a single object, a photograph, Taken minutes after Emily entered the quarry, the image showed 4 people: Richard Blackwood, Samuel Briggs, Evelyn Shaw, and Emily Carter. But standing behind them, watching from the darkness, was someone else. Someone who had never appeared in any document. Someone who had never been questioned. Someone who had controlled the entire operation from the shadows. On the back of the photograph was one sentence written in Emily's handwriting. This is the person everyone forgot to look for. And beneath it, a name that would reopen every assumption about the May 1981 cold case. The name written on the back of the photograph was the final piece investigators never expected to find. For decades, everyone had searched for the same people: Richard Blackwood, Samuel Briggs, Daniel Mercer, Evelyn Shaw. They had followed the money, the evidence, the lies. But Emily Carter had been looking somewhere else. Not at the people standing in front of the crime. The person standing behind them. The photograph was enlarged, enhanced, examined from every angle. The face in the background was partially hidden by darkness, but one detail was impossible to ignore: a ring, a distinctive silver ring with a black stone. The same ring appeared in another photograph recovered from the Black Creek archive. A company dinner. The person wearing it was standing beside Eleanor Voss. The name written beneath the image was Victor Voss, Eleanor Voss's husband, a man officially declared dead in 1980, 1 year before Emily disappeared. The discovery shocked investigators, because Victor Voss was not supposed to exist after 1980. His death certificate stated he had died in a boating accident. His body was never recovered. At the time, the disappearance was considered tragic. A wealthy businessman lost at sea, a grieving widow left behind. But now, the story looked completely different. Investigators reopened the death investigation. The original report was only 6 pages long. No body, no confirmed wreckage, no independent witnesses. Just a boat found drifting near the Maine coast. The insurance payout was enormous. And the beneficiary? Eleanor Voss, the same woman who secretly controlled Black Creek, the same woman who financed the operation, the same woman who had spent decades presenting herself as a community leader. The investigation now had a new theory. Victor Voss had not died. He had disappeared, and he had continued operating in the shadows. The man who created the network, the man Emily discovered, the man everyone forgot, the final missing piece. Agents searched every known address connected to Eleanor and Victor Voss. Most were abandoned, but one location stood out: a remote property in northern Maine, purchased under a fake company name in 1982, 1 year after Emily vanished. The property contained an underground structure, not large, not visible from the surface, built exactly like the chambers beneath Black Creek. Concrete walls, hidden entrance, no records, no permits. Inside, investigators discovered something terrifying: hundreds of files, not company records, personal records, surveillance, photographs, notes. The operation had been collecting information on people for decades: politicians, judges, police officers, business owners, everyone who could threaten them. But one file stood apart from the others: a blue folder. The label, Carter Family. Inside were documents from before Emily was born: her father, her childhood, her education, her relationships, everything. Someone had been watching Emily for years, not because she discovered Black Creek, because she was connected to it. The investigation uncovered the truth about Thomas Carter. He had not accidentally become involved. He had been recruited by Victor Voss decades earlier. Thomas helped create the financial system behind Black Creek, but eventually he regretted what he built. He attempted to leave. Victor Voss did not allow people to leave. Thomas spent years trying to expose the operation quietly. Then Emily found the same evidence. She continued his work. The father and daughter had been fighting the same enemy without realizing how deep it went. But the most disturbing discovery came from Emily's final notebook. One page investigators had previously overlooked. The ink was faded. almost invisible. Using advanced imaging, technicians revealed hidden writing beneath the damaged paper. Emily had written, "Dad was right. They don't destroy evidence. They keep it. They keep everything because secrets are power." Another sentence followed. "Victor is alive." The room went silent. Emily knew. She had discovered that Victor Voss was still alive, and that meant the night she disappeared was not about stopping a witness. It was about protecting a secret that had survived for decades. Investigators searched for Victor Voss. For months, every lead, every possible identity, every financial connection. Then they found him, not in hiding, not overseas, not in some abandoned location. He was living in plain sight, under a new name, in a small coastal community in New Hampshire. He was 81 years old, a retired boat builder. Neighbors described him as quiet, helpful, a man who fixed fishing equipment for elderly residents. Nobody knew his real identity. Nobody knew he was connected to the largest hidden criminal network in Maine history. When agents approached him, he did not run. He simply looked at them and said, "I wondered how long it would take." Inside his home, investigators found a final missing evidence. The original recording from October 17th, 1981. Not a copy, not a damaged version. The complete tape. Victor had kept it, like everything else. The recording lasted 37 minutes. 37 minutes that revealed the truth. Emily had confronted Victor at Black Creek Quarry. She knew about the archive. She knew about the hidden network. She knew about her father's involvement. But she also knew something else. Victor had been planning to disappear permanently. She tried to convince him to turn himself in. She believed there was still a chance. Victor disagreed. The tape captured the conversation. "Emily, you think hiding makes you powerful." Victor, "No, knowing what people hide makes me powerful." "Emily, you destroyed lives." Victor, "I protected an empire." "Emily, it's over." A long silence. Then Victor spoke. "No, it's only over someone remembers." Emily replied, "People will remember me." The recording ended with footsteps, a struggle, then silence. Investigators finally understood. Emily's greatest weapon had been the one thing Victor feared most: memory. She knew secrets only survived when people stopped talking. So she recorded, she wrote, she preserved, she created a trail. And that trail survived 43 years. Victor Voss was arrested immediately. The charges were extensive: murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, financial crimes, environmental crimes. The arrest became national news. But even after his capture, one question remained. Why had Emily been placed in the underground chamber instead of simply being killed and hidden? The answer came from the final pages of Victor's own records. He had kept a document titled "Failures," a list of people who had threatened his operation. Most names had notes beside them. Some disappeared. Some changed. But beside Emily Carter's name were only 2 words. Too dangerous. Because Victor knew something the others did not. Emily was not dangerous because she had evidence. She was dangerous because she understood people. She knew someone would eventually search. Someone would eventually find what was buried. Someone would eventually ask the right questions. And that was a mistake Victor Voss made. He believed burying evidence meant destroying the truth. But he never understood the one thing Emily understood. Evidence does not disappear. It waits.